Hello and welcome to our Friday webinar. It is a surprise webinar with Lisa Bono. Welcome back, Lisa. It's great to see
Thank
you.
you. Thank you. Surprise, surprise.
So if you were just joining us, you're a little confused. We were doing a Ask the Vet with Dr. Tolley today, but he literally just got back from Romania at a vet conference. And so he had to make the difficult choice of, well, he didn't have a choice, but he has to be on a Zoom meeting with some veterinarians from around the world. So he cannot make it today, and he sends his apologies for that. But then Lisa stepped up. Remember, we were going to give you, last time we saw you, Lisa, we were like, oh, I guess we'll have a nice break for you. So surprise, you're back. Thank you.
Hey, yeah, it's I thought I had off till September. So surprise, surprise.
Surprise, surprise. All right. So yeah, this is an episode of Ask Lisa Anything. And should I put in the quotes like bird related or in parentheses? Bird related. Ask anything bird related to Lisa today. Um, all right. Yeah, and so if you're just joining us, yeah, you're at the Ask Lisa Anything webinar in lieu of Ask the Vet that will be next month. I guess we'll be back with Dr. Tolley next time. And again, if you're logging in, tell us where you're coming from. If any questions for Lisa, please use the Q&A button and not the chat feature. And yeah, there we go. And this is the motto. I found my pin today. I love this pin. Do good. This is what Lisa's doing today by joining us. I hope it's not upside down. It was upside down earlier. It's also, I always think of this as a motto of Lafeber Company because they're always striving to do good. So found the pin and that's why I'm wearing it. All right, guys. Yeah, we got people coming from all over again. Lisa, there we go. Let's see what let's see.
I see Kaz. Hi, welcome from Australia or Austria.
Okay, here we go. Sorry, let me see here. Oh yeah, there we go. Okay. I think the first question is why do pet birds chew on a molted feather?
Okay, so there could be a couple different reasons. I don't think there's really a definitive. Maybe when they pull it out, if they don't have other things to chew on or toys to play with, they might find that more acceptable to pick it up and chew on that. They may use it, to like scratch their head and stuff like that. They might like the texture of the feather because it's nice and soft, or they might like the crunchy, center of it, because that makes a different kind of, it's like an emptiness, but when you crunch it down, because I have done it, not that I've chewed on it, crunched it down to see. If it's an older feather, it will be crunchy. So they might like the noise of that as well. So there's a bunch of different reasons why they could be doing it.
Okay. And I have a follow-up question for that is what age do they like, let's say a chick hatches, what age do you typically see like for an African gray, for example? Like when would they start to like preen their feathers? Like and then maybe um is it
Just as their feathers are starting to grow out, they're learning. Where I know with I've had, let's see, two babies that had pin feathers, and I would see them. Let's see, Samson was about 5 weeks when I got him, and I didn't know. I thought he was older because that was the first baby. Not that he was doing it at that point, but because he didn't have a lot of feathers. But as his feathers started to grow in, I would see him start to do things, and then I would help him. And I think that guided him to do it even more. Sydney, I still help him. Emma, I have to help because of her twisted neck and spine. She can't reach one spot on her. So she'd be like a porcupine if I, didn't get in there and help her open up everything.
okay, okay. Thank you. Oh, question about an adopted mixed flock of budgies. They adopted a mixed flock of budgies 3 weeks ago. The one sweet gentleman and six hell-raising hens. That's why my catchword of the day now, catchphrase of the day. Hell-raising hens. They've had only male budgies before, so the hens are demolition divas. This is an awesome description. They will chew down a natural cuddle bone in a day and fake pressed ones in an hour. They did not have many toys and no cuddle bones in their prior home. So they're wondering, one, is this normal to chew this much? And two, do they get much nutrition from the cuddle bones? And three, are the fake ones useless? And four, should they limit them to one or two cuddle bones a week?
Well, yes, they will get some, well, let's start here. With them chewing more woods and being more destructive and going towards the cuttle bone and knowing that parakeets pretty much have eggs all the time, you kind of want to watch that they're not going into breeding mode. They only have one boy, but it's his heaven. So you do have to watch there. I would suggest with the toys that possibly you go a little bit larger or harder. If you need help with that, just reach out to me. I could help guide you to which ones some parakeets like. I was actually surprised one of my clients would come into the store and she'd be getting these bigger things. And I'm like, no, you can't get them for budgies. They can't get around them. And let me tell you, it was a female and she did. So, bigger, a little bit harder, not too hard because they're going to lose it. I probably say, going back to watching my cockatiels and my parakeets, depending on the size of the cuttle bone, you have cuttle bones that might be about this big and, this wide, the little runts of the bunch. And then you've had some that almost are a foot tall. So it really depends on the size. Okay. So try to get the smaller ones. Maybe, I'd say when you got 6 of them in there, maybe one, depending on if you see one chewing more than the other. And it's probably something you want to talk to your vet about when you have an appointment to see if they, getting too much from it or if they can have more than one. I know I usually did like one. So was there something else I missed? Something
Um,
about the fake one. Fake what?
I guess like a fake cuddle bone? I'm not sure. Maybe they can give us more info on that. Um, we do have a question about African greys. They've had two since 2019, and they find that they produce, I'm sure you can relate to this next part, an enormous amount of dust. Is this seasonal or age related? Is it normal for it to be this bad right now, or is it something they just have to learn to live with? And what steps can you take to reduce the dust and dander, the dusty species?
Yes. And believe it or not, cockatoos are actually dustier than African greys, which, you know, um, I was always told that a dusty gray is a healthy gray. Okay. I have one that doesn't produce as much dust as others, and we were a little concerned at that one point. We've had him run for tests after tests after tests, same one 3 times, and it's just he doesn't produce as much. So I believe the more silver ones, the from probably from different parts of Africa, if this would make sense. I see with Sammy, who is, I can't really see because there's a line over my face, but Sammy is in the middle. She is larger and lighter than my other ones, and she produces the most dust. So you're always going to have it. So just keep in mind, like I said, a dusty gray is supposed to be a healthy gray. What you want to do is you want to get a good air purification system. That is very important. I suggest the Austin. They do not have an ionizer on it, and they do not produce ozone, which is important for the respiratory system. And what you want to do is you want to try to encourage a bath maybe twice a week. That'll help cut down some of the dust. You can only imagine the dust I have in this room with the 4 of them in here. So those are some things you can, and I also think it's part of the way the feather disintegrates, which is going to cause more dust. Like my Kaik doesn't really have the same underbelly feathers that all my grays do. And it's not unheard of, me walking around having, feathers in my hair, but the little white, fluffy ones that they lose all the time, every day.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Keep them. You want to protect your electronics, I'm sure, because that dust gets in there too.
Yes.
Um, okay. A question about a Myers parrot who does not like to take a bath except in her water dish. How can they change this and head her more towards using a regular dish? So yeah, likes to dunk in their water dish.
Okay, so what I did with one of my guys, when I was trying to get him to used to it, um, I would take a Pyrex dish, or a Corel dish that's not too deep. And you have to try with different temperature waters. Sammy likes it super cold. I put a couple ice cubes in hers. And Sterling likes it a little bit more warm. That could be because he's older, he has arthritis, they all have different preferences. So I take this dish and I actually put it down on the bottom of their cage, and I've actually sat there with them on the ground, and I would splash it, and I'd put a couple of their favorite toys that could get wet down around it, and maybe in it, or if you have something like that, you can put it in there, make some noise, tap on the dish. I actually have, hold on, I know I'm gonna move my camera here. I have Corel dish right here underneath my computer to make it a little higher because I'm so short. Sorry. And that is the same type of dish that my guys take their baths in. So that's, you want to try something like that. He might be a shower boy, so you might want to try taking him in the shower. If you look for the shower perches, make sure you get one with the 3 suction cup ones, because the 2 are going to end up, just coming off the wall eventually. Or if you have one that can go over, say, if you have a shower door, those are good as well. You might like it like that. You might like it under the faucet. My Kaik likes it better when he can actually rub on something, because that's what I was told they do in the wild. So if I put like a super wet washcloth in there, he'll go up on that and he'll rub around on that. I actually put him under the faucet for a little bit because he seems to like that, and then he'll go over and do that. And people have done like romaine lettuce leaves, stuff like that, made them wet, put them in there, and let the birds go to town on that.
That's right. Yep. Yep. Okay. Question about what methods can help a gray become more comfortable to new things being introduced or new environments?
Okay, depending on where you're going. It's usually stressful for most birds if they're going to, say, the vet's office. So if you're doing something like that, I would suggest to make sure that you take your bird out in the car and drive to other places than just going to the vet. Maybe go to the park, or somewhere fun for them, so they don't always associate the carrier with going to have blood drawn. With other things that are coming maybe in the house, I could tell you I've had birds that have been scared of a water jug, your gallon water jug. Some have been scared of cardboard boxes or paper bags when I'm going through. So you have to watch their body language. If you're walking towards them and you see them start to get spooked, try to move the object so it's not really in their view. Maybe put it, on by your leg or behind your back, and talk to them. Tell them it's okay. I had a friend that his birds were in the dining room, and every time he came in from his garage, he was carrying groceries. So he would come in and he had one young gray that was like terrified of everything that would be coming through. So he started coming through with smaller bags, and then he would say as he's coming through, what was it? It's okay. It's something to that effect. It's okay. He would say coming through. That's what he would say. He'd say, I'm coming through, coming through. So eventually, the bird got used to him coming through that door, carrying things. And instead of my friend having to say coming through, the bird would say, coming through, coming through. So it's kind of conditioning them to help them.
Okay. And do you recommend any diet for pigeons and doves?
You talking wild, or are you talking the racers, or?
I am not sure, but maybe we'll just assume pet companion pigeons or doves.
Okay, there are different types of foods out there. I've usually fed the wild ones. And I know that, I've gotten They have blends, and just like songbird or whatever kind of birds out there, they have different blends that are going to be out there. So a good thing you could do to really find out is know what product you're looking for and call the companies. A lot of companies are really happy to talk to you about, the different formulas they have and what's going to be the best. And, if it is a racer pigeon, you probably need more of something than, say, a rescue dove that was released and, isn't going to be flying around as much.
Okay. And let's see. Okay, so 23-year-old cockatiel is no longer able to fly. Never a good flyer to being cage bound, so never been a good flyer. Now is having difficulty climbing around the vertical bars on the cage front and the back of the cage. The vet says he's losing muscle mass due to aging. He's also maintained a lower weight. They've lowered the perches and put extra assistance perches around the cage to help him get around. But he stays in one side of the cage. Are there any suggestions? So we're talking about a 23-year-old male or a 23-year-old cockatiel.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that, that's the age. Well taken care of, well loved through the years. And I've had a couple that, went up to, I believe, 27. So it's probably due to some sort of arthritis that's going on. You're doing great with the assistant perches and ramps. What you can possibly do is if you see him start to fall at all, you can make sure it's like a washcloth that doesn't have a lot of loops and stuff, or a little towel that doesn't have a lot of loops, and pad a lot of paper towel on top of it. So it's a nice soft spot for him to fall. You might want to, for some sort of exercise that is not going to be too much on him, is maybe, let him play on your couch, put down a big towel or a sheet. So when he poops, you're fine, or on your bed or on your floor, and maybe take a couple of his favorite toys down there and let him play with that. And talk to your vet about it. There are some things that they can help you out with if you want to do some sort of slight medication. One of my guys, under the supervision of my veterinarian, we are on a slight arthritic medication for my 43-year-old gray. So, and they're usually, I noticed with him, he's usually a lot slower and apprehensive for stepping up. Like, by the middle of the day, his foot's right in the air. When I go in to get him, it looks like he's having trouble even lifting it up. So it's kind of like, I gotta, kind of cuddle him and bring him out here, watch where I put him on the tree, make sure he's stable before I go and get anybody else. So it's just a little extra love, just like we do to our seniors when they need some help.
That's right. We have the Lafeber has Lafeber NutriBerry, the senior bird NutriBerries. So
Correct.
their diet for a little extra nutrients there for that.
Say my guys get that as well, because I was at a conference and I met one of your staff there, and we started talking about it with Emma and her liver issues. They suggested that, and then older grays, they also suggested that as well. And I've been using that probably shortly after it's come out.
Okay. And then, so Kate, what are your cage recommendations for a Congo African gray who loves to dump food bowls?
There's a couple different things you can do. It depends on the food bowl. There are some that, depending on the cage, depending on the food bowl, if you have the ones that just hook on the side, you can put like the little plastic zip tie. You can attach the hanger to the cage. They do have some other ones that bolt onto the cage. They also have some bowls that have little nipples that you put in and you twist. So there's a bunch of different things you could do. And then another thing, if they really decide they want to do that, especially if it's water and it's a mess, if you have a toy that you can get wet, maybe something that is stainless steel and or acrylic, put that by the food dish, where if you go and you see him lifting it up at a certain spot or getting his foot in a certain spot to move it, that's where you want to put the toy. Not to impede him from eating or drinking, just simply that one little spot that can impede him from getting his foot or his beak in at one spot to lift the bowl up.
Okay. All right. And then you mentioned before that you don't let your grays walk around on the floor. So they've been working on getting their gray to exercise more, and he's just started exploring climbing down from his cage and walking around a bit. He isn't destructive, at least not yet. And they don't let him under the furniture or into dark places. Are there any other reasons they should keep him off the floor?
Yeah. Unless you're taking your shoes off every time you come in and you have complete control over what's being tracked in at your house. You got your lawn that might be fertilized, or, you have wild birds out there that might be contagious with something, and you're tracking that in. You mentioned that you don't have issues now, which is great, but you will. It
Okay.
will. So to curb that now, as it's happening, what you might want to do is, if you see him coming over or starting to come down, you might want to go and get him right away and put him back on another spot. You can see with the trees that I have behind me, there's different types of play stands. If you have a play stand that's got legs on them, chances are the bird's going to get to the corner and just slide down the legs. We call them stripper poles. So, they just like slide right down. So, but the trees like this, if you could see the trunks on them, again, I can't see my picture because there's something over the whole top. The trunks are wide enough that the bird cannot get down, can't get a beak around it, can't get his foot around it, can't get down. So unless the bird falls or flies, or you assist them with a ladder or a boing getting down, they're not getting off of it. So you want to try to curb that now.
Okay. All right, and then question, my Myers seems to love safflower seeds in his supreme mix and picks them all out. Are they good for them, and could I supplement them by adding more?
You want to make sure that the diet that you're feeding has all the vitamins and everything it needs in it. I won't lie, I use some safflower seed myself. I do not use anything with sunflower. If there happens to be a random sunflower in there, I don't even know if my guys know what that is, because it's always left there. You might want to try using the safflower as a training treat as well. I only use about a teaspoon of safflower in my blends, and my blends meaning for my birds. What I do is I mix a whole bunch of different foods together. And sometimes that's easier in case one of the companies is backlogged with a food. So for instance, I have the senior nutriberries and I also have the pellet berries. So, I'll alternate with something like that. So this way, in case, they're out of the senior nutriberry when I go and order, I still have the pellet berry in my house and I can use. So if it's just a safflower based only diet that he's eating, I'm not a fan of that, because that's going to cause problems long run. If you're supplementing with a lot of fresh foods, if you can get him to eat a pellet, then I don't really have too much problem if you're adding in some safflower.
Okay. Yeah, it's funny because when we think of seed-only diets, we always think of sunflower seeds, but I mean, I had a bird that my conure loved safflower seeds, like to the point where I had to, make sure that wasn't the only thing. He would eat that all day if he had a chance to. But yeah,
Right.
like it's balance and variety, right? And
Exactly. And my Sterling, he was my dad's bird before he came here. And he lived an extremely long time on nothing but safflower seed. I was able to get my dad to get him off the sunflower, but he ate only sunflower seed. I think possibly the reason he's still around is because he was wild caught, and probably back then the genes were a lot stronger than they are now. So that's, though what's going to happen down the road, since he's been with me since 04, he's had a varied diet and he loves his vegetables at night. So that's not a problem. So.
Okay. Oh, we have a question, another budgie question. 9-year-old budgie who has been molting his head feathers since March. So they feed him seeds, pellets, and veggies every day. And they were curious to know what might be making this molt so long. He's been molting since March. He's got the pin feathers on his head.
Okay, perfect. If he's in there with any other birds, if possibly they're picking them out, because then the feathers are just going to continue to grow as they're being, plucked out by another bird. A lot of time a mate will do that, or, if he's sharing a cage. It also could be doing with the environment. I know with my own, what I've witnessed is going into the fall when we turn on our heat, it's drier and we go into a heavy molt. And then again in the spring, the same thing, when it's changing again, we're changing the air conditioning from the heat, they go into a heavy molt. So you might want to check the humidity in the environment, maybe a little bit more bathing, or if he doesn't like bathing, if he allows you to open the little feathers, maybe what you want to do is maybe dab your finger in a little bit of water and maybe just, go on his headland and see if that helps at all.
Okay. And then says, hi Lisa, we just listed our house and we'll be start showing it this weekend. Do you have any recommendations on keeping their Congo African gray, cockatiel, and finches safe and stress-free during the showings? They do cover everyone at night. Would that be a good opportunity during the day as well without screwing up their sleep patterns? So good question.
I need to know if they're in their own room or if they're in the general area of the house. When we sold our houses, because we've moved a lot with the military, they were always in their private room. Now, in my house in New Jersey, the last one we left, we had two of them. Was it two? Yeah, I think there were two cages because we moved Abigail upstairs because we were afraid of her doing that bait and switch, and she would get you good. So we moved her into a private room with the other grays, and I put a note on the door to their room. Please don't stick your fingers in cages. We will bite. I kind of scared them more than anything to keep them away from the birds. I also had a camera in there. And, I know that is not feasible for a lot of people, but, if you have a little camera or if you got a cell phone that maybe you could set up just during that, 20 minutes they're in the house. Another thing I would highly suggest is do not let them post any pictures of the bird cages on the websites for the house for sale. When my real estate agent was taking pictures of the house, I would move all the cages, in there. I had the cages in their one bird room. I'd move them all out, and then she could take a picture of an empty room. I didn't want anybody to know.
Okay. Let's say that you had a situation where you're showing a house and your bird's cage is in like the main room, which is probably like the highest traffic area of the showing. Would you recommend moving them to another room? I mean, even if the birds aren't used to that room, or leaving them with them covered in the living room?
I would leave them uncovered because they're going to hear other people's voices coming in. They might come in with kids. The kids might run by, and if the birds can't see what's going on and they just hear this noise, it might scare them. I would try to get them familiar with a room before I just go putting them in that room. Another thing you could do is get one of those little doggy fences, or what's it, a baby fence? I don't know what they call.
Yeah.
I have dogs, I don't have babies. But you could put that up around the cage and put a note on that. And if you could find it, on garage sale or marketplace or something, get it super cheap, put a note on it. And just keep them away from that immediate area.
Okay. And then, ooh, we have a question about a half moon conure that's turning 1 year old in July. Congratulations. He does not trust my hand yet, but he'll go onto the forearm or walk onto a ladder. How do you get him? So they want to know how they can get him to trust, being on the hand or finger. It's a half moon conure that's just under 1 year old.
Okay. I gather they got him as a baby and he just never really liked hands, or What I would suggest you do is you can always, get him up on that ladder if that's what he feels comfortable with. You can take him over to, say, the arm of the couch. Put him on the arm of the couch. Again, a towel, always protect your furniture. Put a towel over it, let him stand on that, and just let him be near you. Okay. Maybe have a little favorite treat or maybe his toy and play with him like that. You also want to make sure that in his cage is set up for success. A lot of birds, say if they're in their cages and the people will open the door and just leave the door open and a bird comes out by themselves. I'm not a fan of that. I have perches on all of my doors. I've trained my guys to come station on this perch, and that's my cue to know that they want to come out. So I don't have to reach in their cages. Okay. So it's not like I'm coming at them. They're working with me to get out. Now I can certainly reach into any of their cages and get them up because we've built that trust along the way. But it's always good to have the bird work with you, than be afraid of you. So, and actually, let me go show you a perch on the door. We're gonna walk again. I wish that line wasn't there so I could see.
You look
Let
fine.
me know if you could see this.
Yeah, can see.
Okay, so this is Sammy's perch on her door. Okay. So she'll come sit on here when she wants to come out. And this way I open a door and she comes out with it.
There you go. All right. Oh, okay. Another, we've got a Myers parrot question that doesn't like to be sprayed with water to keep her feathers toned and healthy. How do they introduce spray water to her without traumatizing her? It's kind of like a little spray bath.
Well, if you're using a spray bottle, a lot of times the pressure on them is kind of hard. And if it was a rehomed parrot, the first person or second person could have used that as punishment. Okay. So you have to kind of think about why the bird doesn't like it. If you're spraying right at him and it's harder, I mean, I wouldn't like it either if somebody was spraying me with a spray bottle. I wouldn't mind it though, and I know the birds don't mind it as much as if you spray it in the air and it falls down on them like water. Okay, so you might want to try something like that, more natural. And if they don't like the bright yellow spray bottle, they might not like yellow. Try, a natural color one, a clear one that might not be as spooky. So, but never go right at them, towards the face, towards the head. That's, yeah, not
Okay.
good.
Okay. Is millet as a treat? I'm sorry. Is millet as a treat healthy for a 4-year-old green cheek conure? So millet as a treat.
Yeah, I would say so. I had no problem feeding any of my smaller birds, a little, I don't give them the whole sprig. I give them a little bulb or whatever you want to call it, the little ball that you can pull off. Because otherwise, they'll just eat that, okay? They eat that in the wild, so there's, where it's grown in the wild, whatever parts of the world that have the millet, you're gonna find the birds sitting there eating it all. So as a treat, I don't personally have a problem with it.
That's right. And with millet, when I used to for my bird with treats, if I pulled it off, I would just pull off like all the millet would go down the ground. So I would cut it. I found out if I cut the little bulbs off, I was able to keep more millet on the actual millet stick then, right?
Yeah, and you can use that as well as, a reward. So for instance, the bird's out and he has to go in his cage, you can give him a little, the little ball of it. Or if you want to, bring him out and sit on the couch, yes, you're gonna have a mess, but you can figure it out. Take him out, hold it in your fingers, let him nibble on it there. So you can use it as a reward, but just keep in mind, if you're using it several times a day, you're gonna make sure you get, even those little balls may be cut in half because otherwise they're just gonna fill up on that millet.
Yeah, going back to half moon conure, that's the way to maybe get it on your hand is like a little tiny millet because man, which they all love
Yeah, you
millet.
have to find A lot of times people will ask me, what is the best treat? The best treat is what your bird finds as a high reward.
Yeah.
So it's all different in my house. My guys wouldn't eat millet here. Emma would do just about anything for a cashew. So, where Sterling could really care less, he would like a little piece of walnut. So I don't feed whole nuts or even half nuts. I usually break them down into, see, Sterling just agreed with me. I break them down really small, that they could still see and be able to take it from my hand. And, that's how we work with it.
Okay. And one of our viewers, Barbara, wanted to know, did I hear you say no sunflower seeds? Was that something that you said?
I
No.
did not say no sunflowers, okay? You can use them as treats. There's really not much nutritional value to a sunflower. The shell is actually pretty big, okay? But the sunflower inside is actually very small. So you think you're given this big dish of sunflower seeds, but in reality, there's just these little pieces inside of it. Okay. So again, as a reward, it wouldn't be a high value reward in my house. My guys don't like it. But you can use them as a reward. I just urge everybody who's on a seed-based diet, if you have a bird that, I mean, some of the species, I've had clients in the past where some species we decided to stay on more of a seed-based diet than a pelleted diet because they were having a hard time with the pelleted diet. And because some parts of the world, this is what I was told. I might be wrong. I was told that pellets tend to make the birds have to drink more water. Okay. Don't know why, but that's what I was told. So until I'm told different, that's what I'm going with. In some parts of, the world, you have droughts. So these birds aren't taking in more water that they would necessarily need. So, they have a harder problem. So, if you do a seed based diet, with the smaller, this happened to be a budgie. So we're talking Australia, we're talking, dry seasons, not getting a lot of water. He did better, on a seed-based diet than a pelleted diet.
Okay. Let's see if we have. Sorry, I'm looking at our little comments here. Yeah, and that they have those that remember you can get them as a kind of like a foraging thing, like where it's actual sunflower that has the sunflower seeds. Do you ever? I mean, but those are massive. Some of them like the sunflowers. So I guess you wouldn't want to have it in the cage all day, but maybe like a.
Well, yeah, some of those toys, I think the birds are probably going to rip it apart more than actually eating the sunflowers. That's what I would think. If I put it in Sterling's cage, he'd probably have it torn apart, but really didn't eat anything. So you just got to kind of watch. And I have to go back and I have to add about any kind of seed-based diet. They are not all created equal, okay? If you're going to use a seed, make sure it's high quality, okay?
Okay. Yeah, and someone has a follow-up. Someone wanted to know how do you get them off a sunflower seed diet?
What I did, with my dad's bird, we ended up doing, well, a lot of times with the birds, if they don't recognize the food that's put in front of them, they're going to pick it up and throw it. So what I usually suggest with my clients, especially with their grays, because they tend to be a little bit too smart for themselves, I'll have them sit there and I'll have them, have a bowl of whatever they're trying to convince the bird to eat. And I'll have their bird sit next to them. And I'll have them completely ignore their bird and pretend like they're eating it. Okay. So then the bird's going to be like, hey, what do you have? How come I can't, I want some of that. So you can try some of that and you're never going to go cold turkey. You're just going to incorporate other foods. Say, for instance, you want to try them to get on, a senior Nutriberry. I wouldn't suggest necessarily just throwing it in a bowl with their sunflowers because they're going to eat the sunflowers around it. So again, if you sit next to them, act like you're eating it, and then say, "Oh, would you like some?" And let them try it that way, act like it's some kind of super treat. And then eventually you could put it in the bowl. So if you're doing, if it's all sunflower, then you probably want to do is maybe do like maybe a 60-40 mix with maybe a safflower, and then you move it along, and then you start incorporating other things. Or another good thing is if you do a nightly diet like I do for them, that's usually the time they come out and have all their vegetables. So you can actually put things in there as well, sprinkle it on top. And again, they think it's something special and they get used to eating it. And I have a better, if they're not going to eat a pellet I offer them, I'll throw it on top of the dinner. And it's like the best thing they ever had because they never saw it before, even though it just came out of the bowl. So
Okay, and then so Lisa, what is your daily feeding slash treats slash enrichment regimen for your grays? What's your routine?
okay, my routine is everybody is in their rooms sleeping. Their little sleep rooms and their little sleep cages where it's nice and quiet. I come out in the morning, I usually sweep and then I vacuum. I make sure everybody cages are clean. I'll wake them up, I'll take their covers off. Emma and Sterling will not poop in their cage. They will if they're in there too long, but they'd rather come out. So I have a bag here. I'll hold them over the bag, let them go. Then I take out Sammy and Sydney, and everybody goes under trees as I'm doing their bowls of food. Usually with the girls, what I'll do is any kind of little piece of nut or their apple nutriberry. They love the pumpkin. We need that back. So what I do with that is I take either like a little cupcake thing, or you can use a coffee filter. You can use a little box. You can use paper towel. I wrap that stuff. I wrap a nutriberry up in like a little quarter sheet of a paper towel, and then I'll hide it around their cages to go in there and forage. Sterling just, he doesn't even bother. He's not interested in ripping anything apart like that. Sydney, he really doesn't either. He's more of a picker and thrower. So they'll have their treats in their regular food dish. And again, it's not a lot. Then everybody goes in their cages, they forage, they eat, they take a nap. And that's, usually they're in their cages all day. There's nothing wrong with them being in their cage. It's kind of like us being in our house. We're secure, we're safe, we find things to do. If they have the right toys, they shouldn't be bored in their cage, and the cage should never be a punishment. Okay, that should be their spot that people shouldn't be sticking their fingers in, and letting them have their own thing. And then at night, of course, I feed the husband. And then what I'll do is I usually sit on my chaise lounge. Everybody comes out and they're on their trees. Sterling flies back and forth constantly. Sydney's busy yelling for my husband. The girls are just watching, wondering where their food is. I'll move all their, day food and fresh water into their night cages. I'll change all their papers while they're out on their trees. And then I'll make them their nightly dinner. They sit on their trees, they eat their nightly dinner. They'll maybe hang out about another half hour, and then everybody starts going to bed.
There you go. All right. That's a busy day.
Yeah. Yes. My husband asked me to go for a ride on a motorcycle the other day. He said to me, he says, "Do you want to go at noon, or do I have to watch you for 3 hours, take care of the birds in the morning?" And I'm thinking, it doesn't take me 3 hours, but yeah, you still got to watch me take care of the birds in the morning.
Oh man. Okay. Okay. Oh, okay. So someone had a question about peanuts. Are they okay? Are they good to feed your bird? So can birds have peanuts?
It depends. If you're going to feed a peanut, it has to be high quality. And even if you're doing the high quality stuff, you have to make sure that it doesn't have any mold or hasn't come in contact with any mold. So if you're looking at a peanut, you have one that looks perfectly normal, okay, in the shell. And then you have this other one that has this black stuff on it. That black stuff is mold, okay? That is no good for those birds to be around. It's no good for them to ingest. They can get very sick for that. When one of my grays had aspergillosis, one of the first things they asked me is if I'm feeding peanuts. I was not at that point, but still that always stuck in my brain. Now, the only way you can really tell a healthy peanut from what they call sick with black mold peanut is to hold it underneath the black light and see if it fluoresces, or it shows you any kind of mold. They say that freezing, cooking, boiling, steaming, none of that is enough to kill the mold on the bird. Maybe it's just not worth the issues you might come up with if your bird ended up getting sick. I was told that, and this came from a vet, that the only products that they would use that had peanuts was actually some of the Lafeber products, because you guys check them regularly. And at the time it was said that they were cleaned and they were sterilized. That I have to confirm with you guys again, if that was the correct word I'm saying. Sterilized might not have been the word, but I don't know why that's sticking in my head. But anyway, that's the only product I will tell people that I'll use that has anything like that in it.
Okay. Yeah, I was always curious if you could, like if you're at the store and you see like the unsalted planter peanuts that like like snack on, like can a bird have,
Yeah.
have one of those? I was just always, yeah, I'm curious about the peanuts too with that regard.
Yeah, I
Um,
just see on there, it says fever test every
yeah, and
batch of
so
peanuts.
yeah,
Great, yes.
Brennan,
So, I can't say that for all the other companies. So that's
there you go.
why, yeah.
Um, oh, and someone wanted to know, what brand of cages do you prefer?
It depends. One of my favorites is no longer in business. Avian Adventures. I
Mm,
just love their cages. The way they put together. I mean, there was no nuts and bolts, nothing to strip. I could take it apart a big cage by myself. You can put the panel in the shower and clean it. Now, nowadays you need to really have somebody holding the side of the cage while you're unscrewing something. I tend to like King's cages. I have a good working relationship with them. Since their move down to Florida, they're slowly getting their products back in. I have actually Featherland. I have stainless steel cages, and they are very nice and light. Again, and I have some old Avian Adventure stainless steel cages, and that's what I originally wanted to go with, but I ended up going with the Kitech. Kitech is very nice because they're so light that you can pretty much roll them with one hand. Even the massive, I have 36 by 24 and they're taller than I am.
mm,
I can move that with one hand, but they're really not meant to be moved much. And the entire center of it, the two sides and the front and back, fold in like an accordion. So you can't really take that apart to put in your shower because that piece is heavy if you're trying to move it by yourself. So it really depends on the species, what you're looking for, what your goals are, and then we could, move from there.
okay. What is
Oh,
their nightly dinner? Sorry.
real quick, and there's another decent cage out there. If somebody's going to go for stainless steel and they want more of a heavier one, A&E does make a good stainless.
Which one? Sorry.
A&E,
Oh, AD. Okay.
yeah, they make a good stainless. The size for the African grays, the 3224s that I usually go for, or 2332 is the number on it. That's dimensions of it, and they're a heavier cage. So if it's an older person now, like I'm getting there, it's a little bit more for me to move around than say the Featherland.
Okay. So someone wanted to know, what is your bird's nightly dinner And can you also clarify what your birds like always have? You always that your birds always have some type of food available to them. So what's their nightly dinner and what food do you always have available for them?
Okay, their nightly dinner is gonna be comprised of, I use Harmony House. They're dehydrated vegetables, so they have a lot of organic stuff. They have the pumpkins, a sweet potato, green beans, they have kale, spinach, zucchini, red peppers, green peppers, and I know there's more. But that is like what the vegetables that I'll put in there. And then they may have, in one batch I do small batches. They might last 4 or 5 days and I'll freeze some. Some might have a little bit of oatmeal on it. Some might have a little bit of tricolor pasta or say spinach pasta or I think there's a carrot pasta. I'll put that in there, not much, but they have that in there if they want to. And then I'll make fresh zucchini, squashes, sweet potatoes. I'll cook them all up. That gets mixed in, and then I'll top it off with some frozen vegetables, like their peas, their corn, the little square carrots, which none of the birds really like, but they come in those mixes. And I'm trying to think, I'll use a lot of the riced veggies. So they have a broccoli and cauliflower, and they have a broccoli and sweet potato. I'll use that. So that's pretty much their nightly dinner. I try to switch it up, a little bit. I might leave the pumpkin out one time, or I might put a couple nuts in there, mash them up and put them in there. And then they have an array of just about every type of pellet that's out there, and a little bit of safflower seed in their dishes all day long. So I'm not one to limit food. Okay. Now, while there's some species that maybe you do want to limit, like if you have an Amazon that does nothing but eat all day,
Yeah.
you might want to, consider limiting a little bit more. But I know people who will only give, 5 pellets, or, they say, don't give them this food. And how do you know, unless you're going to your vet, which I know a lot of people should be, but aren't, how do you know that your bird is overweight? You don't know. My smallest gray is 372, and that's Emma. My largest gray was 680. So he was not fat. He was just huge. And that was really like my first gray. So I didn't know how huge he was. All the ones behind me are in the low 4s. So, your vet is the one that's really got to assess to see if he's overweight to be on any kind of diet before you start limiting. So I've never limited, I'm not going to go in there and put 16 nuts in there. They're going to have more of their pellets in their food dish than,
Okay. And before I get to the next question, I had a question about water. So how often do you change it? What would be like a minimum amount you change changing the water bowl? Like, can you just have it one couple, like change it once a day, twice a day? Depends if your bird's a dunker. Just what's the water bowl protocol that you follow?
Abby was the worst. She would dunk anything. So, I'd come in here, every couple hours to check and see if she needed something. I tell my bird sitter the same thing. Make sure you check Abby. Even after you put her in bed at night, they still have their food from their day cages go into their night cages. So even though she had her food all day, even though she just had her nightly dinner, I moved the food into there, and she's like a little pig, and she's covered, she's eating, she's looking at the little peephole, and she's dunking everything. So I would get her covered, put her to bed, and the last thing I would do before I would leave the room is change her water again. So Sydney and Emma are my dunkers here. I think that also has to do with the shape of the bowl, because it's a round stainless steel bowl. So it's easier to do than, say, the bowls that the Kitech cages have, because you have to step into there. So I would say average is 2 times for those two, maybe even 3. The other ones I usually do, once a day, but again, they're not in those cages at night. So they might be in their day cages with their water, maybe 6 hours. And then they're coming out on their trees. And then they're going into another room that has fresh water. So
Okay. Yeah. Guess you really tune into your birds' patterns if they're dunkers but I mean, would you recommend changing the water at least twice a day, like in the morning and then?
I probably would, because you don't know if by accident they pooped in it or if there's a piece of toy in it. I'll always check before I leave the house.
Mm,
To make sure that everybody, if you need it changed right now, before I go. So I'm checking all the time.
yeah. Yeah. Okay. So question about, okay, they have two large tree play stands. Do you have any idea of how to keep the toys on it? So they have a blue and gold macaw who will remove the entire toy no matter how it is hung. So they use chain, rope, etc., and he still managed to remove the toy. Right now, he has a stainless steel bucket that they fill with blocks, mahogany pods, finger traps, miscellaneous wood toys. But he would like to give him some other options to play with. So he likes to detach toys apparently. We're talking about blue and
Yeah.
gold.
Um, what I would suggest, the trees should have stainless steel, or you can change them to stainless steel little eye hook things. Okay, they screw into the tree. There are toy hangers that I wish I could describe it better. It's kind of like a U shape, and on the bottom of it, it's an acrylic ball. Okay, so it kind of screws shut, or the ball will screw up towards the stainless steel piece. That should be able to fit on a tree with large enough eye hooks. Now, what I had to do with Abby a lot of times, and sometimes with Sterling, is where the toys are supposed to be hanging with those little eye hook things. I would put them on there with zip ties. Okay. The problem with the zip ties is when you cut them, they become a little sharp. So you might want to have a little file, to get the corners off so they're not sharp and scratching toes. That might help as well. If a toy is strung on rope, everybody's going to knock that down. So there are some kind of, I'm seeing carabinets. What's that?
Oh,
Stainless
the
steel. That might be the word of what I'm looking for.
yeah.
But yeah, you should be able to change it out on the trees. Another thing you could do is if you tie it, say you tie the leather or the rope or whatever the toy is strung on the tree. Okay. And then you go over it with vet wrap. It's going to take them a while to get through the vet wrap to get to what's underneath to knock them down.
Okay. Um, oh, and she said, sorry, apparently the blue and gold, he removes the eye hooks. So
Uh, okay.
he's a real dedicated to deconstructionist, you could say with them.
Yeah, I'd have to think about this one. Um, yeah, have her reach out to me. I'll try to think if there's another product that's out there that they may be able to use. They might have to go through the trunk, depending on the size. You can't drill smaller branches, but they might have to figure out. I'll ask some of my toy distributors.
Okay. How about a block toy with just all the eye hooks that he could just forget about the other stuff in his cages. Wow, this is just
Yeah, my guys aren't strong enough to remove the eye hooks.
that's a dedicated geek right there. Okay.
Yes.
Wow. Well, we are out of time. I think we got through like every question. That was amazing. Are pretty much yeah. Lisa, thanks again for subbing in today. Like a last minute SOS. You came through as always. Totally appreciate it.
No problem. Anytime.
That was a
So,
Yeah, it was I was like, I can't answer any Ask the Vet questions, and so that would be hopeless. And you answered some important questions today. So thank you for joining us for that and filling in for Dr. Tolley's episode. Um, and we'll see you back. When do we see you back? In July? No, September, right? Well, who
September,
knows?
after the AFA conference, I'll be back.
Okay, okay. So our next webinar, and Brenda, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it is on July 11th. With Pamela Clark is going to do a pet bird behavior Q&A. So join us July 11th for that one, the pet bird behavior Q&A with Pamela Clark. And we have a giveaway winner today. That is going to go out to Michael Tulper, some apple flavored Nutriberries, the latest and greatest limited edition Nutriberry flavor apple ones, as well as another Lafeber product of your bird's choosing. So there we go. There we go. So we'll see you in September, Lisa. I'm sure you'll fill us in on it's AFA, right? Is yeah. Okay. There we go.
Yeah, I'm going to be covering the AFA conference.
There. All right. Nice. 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 Okay. Unless, who knows, we might see you in July or August because you popped up today. No, I'm just kidding. All right, guys. Thanks again, Lisa, for filling in. Thank you all for
Well,
joining us today. And we'll see you July 11th, hopefully, for our next episode with Pamela Clark, Pet Bird Behavior Q&A. All right, guys. On that note, all the best in your flock. Take care. Till next time, stay safe. Bye.
happy summer.
Happy summer. Yeah, that's right. Longest day of the year right tonight, right? Tomorrow. It's summer. Summer's officially here. There you go.
Yes.
All
Yes.
right, guys. Bye.
Bye.